So, hello everyone. My name is Laszlo and I'm going to speak about negotiation in the next 20 or so minutes. Let me start with a disclaimer. I'm not an expert negotiator. I'm not even the best negotiator in the room. My kids, somewhere around, they are way better than me. And the reason is that children are not really prevented by the inhibitions of social acceptance and other psychological wretchedness which we acquire during our life. But then we grow up and we're starting to miss those soft skills we lost during the journey. For instance, I'm a delivery manager working with EPAM for the last 15 years or so, and it might be a correct assumption that I have some clue about negotiation. But the truth is, I could do better, and that's the reason why I started to investigate this field. My first encounter with negotiation was 3 years ago in the business school, where we learned business negotiation. And later I realized this is more like bargaining than negotiation. And let's make a distinction here. What is bargaining? Most of people are identifying negotiation with bargaining, but in fact bargaining is just a subset of negotiation. And it's a pretty mechanical one, which means typical marketplace bargaining. How much is the apple? It's $8. I give you 5, and then we meet somewhere in the middle. As a delivery manager, I was less interested in such type of negotiation. Except my yearly salary, my typical use cases are around client engagement and development team and so on. For instance, what do you do when somebody is requesting something which you think is nonsense? How do you make him change his mind? Or what happens if a stakeholder won't reply to you and you have a request and you want him to reply? There is an alternate way to achieve this, which is called manipulation. It's a nice label to tell lies and half-truths, but those who knows me, they also know that I'm a pretty straight guy. I'm not that interested in being. I'm not that comfortable to achieve my goals in this way. So after reading several books on the topic, which are mostly around mechanical bargaining or manipulation, I came across this book called Never Split the Difference: Negotiating as if your life depends on it. It was written by an ex-FBI agent, a hostage negotiator called Chris Voss. And as you can see, I shamefully stole the title because my goal here is to give you some learnings out of this book and ultimately to give you some tips on how to be a better negotiator. The first question you might ask: why would we give credit to, oversimplifying, a police guy over highly credited CEOs and successful business guys who wrote similar books on the topic? And the answer is simple. If an FBI hostage negotiator makes a mistake, somebody might get hurt. And that is a pretty good incentive to come up with the best framework possible. Not to mention that these guys are bringing some fresh eye on the topic, unlike business guys or academia. This is quite new. So let's deep dive in the topic, in the book actually. one of the biggest tweak FBI did after 9/11 is to replace the old school mind or rational driven negotiation, and they brought the emotional driven one. Because negotiation is happening between humans, and humans mostly are driven by emotions. Even if they think rational, they are biased by subjective influences. So in order to go emotional, you need to take the other side as a human, and you need to discover the human side of the other people. And here you might say, okay, let's cut the crap. We don't have really time, like a 30 minutes business negotiation. We don't have time to go with, this touchy feeling discussions to discover the other ones. And you might be right, but I have a story here. I have a friend with special skills. He can make people to tell their own inner secrets in no time. I witnessed once, we were traveling in a cab, and the taxi driver, he told his most intimate personal life, and even started to cry in like 3 minutes. And I couldn't realize how this guy is doing, because he was actually not even talking. And reading this book, I realized the technique he's using, and it's called mirroring. In short sentences, mirroring means that you repeating the last words of the person with the right tone. And let me give you an example, maybe you will understand better. So here's the example. IT example. You have a project which with tight deadlines, everybody is working hard. There's a solution architect on the other side, which is not helping that much, and one day he's calling the delivery manager and he's saying, I cannot accept this architecture, this is ridiculous. So first thing, this is offensive. Saying architecture created by your team is ridiculous is offensive. So your first instinct is that you will counter attacks in some way. But this delivery manager is doing mirroring, so he's saying, so it's ridiculous. It's like asking what it means about ridiculous. And essays say, this way we won't conform to non-functional requirements. So then the delivery manager is pressing forward, and he says, yes, the non-functional requirements, please keep saying. And then the essay says, the ones we sent last week. And that's the right point. That's where we want to be. Because saying out loud that they sent last week, he made the solution architect to kind of realizing that this is the last time, and he offerings to give one more week of redesign. In a normal situation, without mirroring, a delivery manager would confront the essay saying that, hey, you sent us in the last minute and we couldn't conform and and they will get in an agreement, they will get into a fight, which obviously cannot be won by the DM, because essay is customer and customer is always right. But with the mirroring and with non-confrontational tone, the delivery manager made him to extend the deadline. And that's the trick of mirroring. But there's a challenge. This is actually my personal challenge, but you might also recognize it. As a manager, I'm incentivized to control the narrative, to speak a lot just to control the scene. And as a consequence, I'm very bad in active listening, which prevents me to do effective mirroring. So I had to practice a lot, to be honest, to shut my mouth. The second tip from this book is about tactical empathy. In human connections, empathy has a key role. I won't be Captain Obvious to explain you what is what is empathy. All I say that in business environment, empathy is sometimes considered as negative, something which makes you weak. And this might be true because going deep into somebody's personal affairs could cause you some trouble. On the other hand, without empathy, we won't be able to build a trustworthy relationship. And without trust, negotiation won't work. And we might talk later why trust it's so important. Anyway, the recommendation is to go with something called tactical empathy. This means that you will listen the other party with empathy, but make sure to not agree with what he's saying, rather acknowledge the other part. But there's a challenge. This type of listening can reveal negative sentiments, and this can blow up your negotiation when somebody is raising something very negative. And the solution offered by the book is called labeling. Labeling is again very simple, repeating again the sentiment which was phrased by your parties with your own words. So you're repeating back what he said with your own words. And let me give you an example. Let's suppose your flight was cancelled, and angry people are just rushing to the desk, wanting a solution from the desk operator. This desk operator is overwhelmed. He cannot really help, so he's keep rejecting people in the line. And then there's this guy who is equipped with labeling techniques. He would start with labeling the situation with tough day. And this opens a channel of empathy, and the desk operator starts to explain, yes, it's been like this for the whole weekend, and I'm doing my best here, but I can't help all these people. And here's the key: he or she cannot help all these people, but he might be able to help some of them. So then this guy fires a positive labeling, saying, it seems you're handling the situation nicely. And then comes with a request. I've been also affected by this cancellation, and he's asking if there is a possibility to a seat to be opened. And following this tactic, he has high chances to get a seat, because labeling negative sentiment is diffusing it, and positive one is just enforcing, is creating this channel. This is how it works. For the next advice, I have to share you a personal story. When I was a kid, I was always saying no to any request. So when my mother was asking to, let's say, wash the dish, I instantly say no without thinking. And then 5 minutes later, I did the job silently. And I kept doing this for a while. I even said no to one of my biggest opportunities without thinking. And next day, I had to humiliate myself and go back and say, hey, I changed my mind. And I was thinking for years, why am I doing this? This book has a pretty good explanation on this. People feel more powerful when they say no. When you want something from a person, the other person is in power position. So he might say no. Not because he wants to say no, just because he can say no. And this said, you should never be afraid when somebody is saying no, because that moment might be just the beginning of negotiation, not the end. The problem is that most of us, including me, is getting blocked when they get a rejection. This is human nature. So there's a tactic to work with this. When you start a negotiation, instead of asking your main request, you can request something completely unrelated, completely insignificant, on which your counterpart might say no. Once he said no to the first request, you can ask the second one, and you have high chances to get positive agreement on the second one, because people are not comfortable to say no twice. So again, you start negotiation with something insignificant, you get the first no, and then you can move further. Another trick. Most of us are formulating the request by getting a yes. So when somebody is, approaching, let's say a colleague approaching his manager for a request, you might ask, did he say yes? But why are we formulating this? Why we don't reverse it? Just asking question to which the agreement is no. This can be used nicely to typical case when somebody is not replying to your email. Instead of confronting him why he's not replying, you can say something like, "Are you still in the no? Were you assigned to another task?" And obviously, most probably the answer is no, and you have high chances to get reply because he has to answer with a no answer. And now that we talked about no's, let's speak a little bit about yes. Many times people are agreeing with you just to get rid of you. But in reality, they don't intend to honor your agreement. A sentence like yes, I agree, let's talk about this next time. It's a typical answer when you can feel that something is fishy. This guy doesn't want to say yes. But because you're happy with the small victory, you won't challenge it. And on the end, you might get nothing. Instead of accepting the small victory, you should push for some real resolution. First, by making your counterpart to repeat the agreement once more. That is a firm agreement, when he is repeating the same time once more. But also it's important to work on the action points, how you will implement together this agreement. And that is a real yes. Okay, I could go forward until my tongue gets dry, but unfortunately the end of the speech is not negotiable. So as a last sentence, remember that negotiation is not a battlefield, but rather a process of discovery. And today we talked about mirroring and tactical empathy and the power of no. These are all tools for discovery. There is more to learn from this book. For instance, about salary negotiation. Read the book if you need a pay raise. And one more thing, don't forget to enjoy your next negotiation. Thank you for listening me, and feel free to contact me if you are happy to discuss this subject. Thanks again.